Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Dustin with Remax, just coming at you with a little video here. It's been a long time since my good friend Steve has been on any kind of video with me. He's been busy traveling and doing a bunch of other things, and he's venturing into some really cool stuff, especially for the law enforcement community, that I wanted to make sure that I got his information out there. So I just wanted to make this video for everybody, and hopefully everybody gains something from it, and hopefully we can help Steve out, get this research that he's doing right now. It would be great to just blow it out of the water because I feel so passionately about it, and I just think it's so important. So, Steve, thanks for coming on, buddy. I appreciate it.
Oh man, it's always good to see you. It's always good to talk to you. I love it.
So, I know me and you talk all the time, but tell people about your travels a little bit lately. Kind of what have you been up to?
I mean, the traveling, we actually had a big break, but we took a cruise through Eastern Europe, Barcelona, Montenegro, Croatia, these crazy places on a cruise ship. It was fun because, you know, you got to see so many places. It's a good way to decide whether or not you're going back. And that was a much needed break, Dustin, from, you know, all the work that's been going on. I wanted to make writing, work out for me. And so far, I'm letting like the way writing's pulling me in all these different directions. It's doing just that. So it's not, that's pretty cool that I'm able to turn writing into work. So
Yeah, it's just and like I said, we talk, pretty. I mean, I'll pretty much three times a week. So I mean, I know a lot of what's going on, but from writing the book and promoting the book and doing the podcast and doing those things, you got a couple other ventures that you're going into right now. The main thing I wanted to reach. I know that you've been doing research as it pertains to law enforcement distress syndrome, and for those of you that don't know, I mean. Steve's starting to get looked at more and more like an expert in this field. And he's been on, news broadcasts and things like that to give police perspective on some of these issues. So I don't feel like there's anybody even more qualified than him to kind of kick this research off, especially with where his book came from and everything else. So what made you get into doing the research for this?
So, I mean, you and I talked about this sort of what happens after you leave the police job. And I started noticing, especially with some distance from the police job, that there were some things going on for me. And, I talk openly about my therapy because my mom put me, in counseling when I was 5 when my parents got divorced. So it's kind of always been a part of my life. I went through the police department. For me, it's just like going to the barber. It's just something that you do. So, and I've always liked it. I always think therapy is one of those things that you'll get to where you're going faster than you would on your own. What would have taken me 10 years to figure out on my own, I can do it in a year in therapy. And so for me, it's a quality of life issue. And I've always been intrigued by emotions and, this kind of like cognitive stuff that goes on in the human brain. So I think it was a natural segue, but I was very curious about what was going on with me and some of the things that I was struggling with. Like I know there's 8 symptoms in law enforcement distress syndrome. And I didn't suffer from all of them, but I noticed a few of them. For instance, we talk a lot about hypervigilance, where police officers are just constantly on the alert. And it's not even such, hypervigilance is good in a way that, okay, you got to be aware of your surroundings so that nothing bad happens to you, especially while you're working. But what I draw the distinction about in my writing is when that progresses from a healthy hypervigilance to a point where quality of life suffering and you can't relax at restaurants and you can't relax at home. And what I've found is that for me, it got worse over time. And so I had this idea. I wrote about law enforcement distress syndrome. I defined it. I talked about the different symptoms. I consulted with mental health professionals. I published it. And the response was like even better than the book. So people started writing me and telling me of their experiences. And then I thought, well, I need to do like more research about this because I'm not sure if I'm the only one that's experiencing this. And I knew like you'd had some of it, some of the like friends that I knew that were in law enforcement did it.
Right.
So I did the survey, and I think you took it, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Yeah, it really didn't take much, honestly. I mean, you did a great job with outlining it and that kind of thing, and kind of keeping it so you didn't really know exactly what you were answering. You know what I mean? Which is good for us because you don't want to have those stats skewed. You know what I mean? Because we know what you're trying to get at or something like that. We answer how we think you want us to answer and things like that. So I think that how you did your survey as well. Not only is it really easy to take, but it's also it's very neutral when you're going through it.
So there's 3 parts to it. One, there's questions I want you to answer and as if you were on duty, and then there's questions you answer as if you're off duty, and then there's some open-ended stuff at the back which is optional. A lot of people don't feel comfortable You don't have to leave your name. You don't have to leave identifying information. I would appreciate it. I think one of the reasons I've had such great success with this survey is because like cops are naturally skeptical, right? So they hear the survey, they go, well, who are we talking to? Who's taking this information? And they go to my website and they find out about me and what I'm doing and who I am. And they're like, oh, okay. So, the fact that I did the job for 15 years and that I'm involved in this, and that my ultimate goal really is to help the cops. But for those of you who haven't taken the survey, it's past former law enforcement or current. It takes about 15 minutes. And the results so far, so I'm waiting to do a really in-depth analysis, Dustin, because I don't want to spend a week analyzing numbers and then get 500 more surveys and have to do it again. So I'm waiting until the end when I feel like I have a decent sample size in order to make some legitimate findings, till I do a really in-depth analysis. But so right now we're still doing a push for people to complete the surveys.
Yeah, that's so awesome, man. And I know that just since I've left, I don't know what your experience has been. I think we've talked about it. We've had a lot of the same experiences, but one thing that I always get asked by cops, I talk to cops still. Like those were my friends, and for 10 years, those were people that I relied on to make sure that I came home every single shift. And one thing that I noticed is that I didn't realize how much that job had changed me. Starting in it at 22, 23 years old, like I did. You don't know, exactly what's going on at that stage in your life, and you have testosterone's going through the roof and all this stuff, and it's just fun, right? But when I take a step back and I look at it now, and I've been out of the police field for over a year, and that my life's starting to go into a different direction and everything, I realized that I wasn't finding joy in a lot of the things that I'm finding joy in now. I mean, that was a big thing, was going out, like you said, going out to dinner. Now, I still don't like to go to like nightclubs and be around big groups of people or anything, but I don't necessarily have a problem anymore. I'd rather not, but I don't have as much of a problem with where I sit, right? Or something silly like that. Or, I don't feel like, we get stressed out in our day-to-day lives, doing that job, it is, I want to say 10 times higher in my opinion. Obviously it's nothing to prove that, but we're drinking and we're staying out till 4 a.m. and we're, like I joke with everybody, was my days off were Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So Tuesday was my Friday night, and we go turn the town upside down on a Tuesday night, and everybody else has to work, and you're waking people up when you come home and all these, but you really don't care, and it's not that you don't care, it's that that's life, and that's your life at that point, and you don't realize the ways that it changes you. And then I think with your research, people can maybe get a better bearing on it, and it could help relationships, and it can help them just understand, what they're actually going through, and not just, hey, I'm a cop, this is just what we do, and this is, this is how you do it, and this, everything else, because nothing is ever just in that box, right? I mean, everything can go out, in my opinion. So,
one of the things I ask in my survey is what you just mentioned is most of my friends are cops. That's a question in the survey. And the majority of police say that has become true since they've become an officer, which is interesting. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but when you get surrounded by the same people doing this type of work, I think what happens is you can feed a lot of this negativity. And unfortunately, like it or not, it's just the truth of the matter is that law enforcement climates all across the country are just negative places to work right now. I mean, a lot of it has to do with the job. A lot of it has to do with what's going on in the country. A lot of it has to do with just the nature of the work, but that is the way it is right now. I mean, I have people say, God, and just from all branches of law enforcement, like, man, being at work can be such a downer. People are negative, and I'm not saying everybody, but that does seem to be a thing,
Yeah.
And now you have people as cops, like it's showing, and this is the perception of the police officers taking the quiz. The majority of them feel that the department doesn't have their back, that the media is against them, and that the majority of people dislike the police. And, it's not a boo-hoo situation, like, oh, well, poor cop, they feel like nobody likes them. But what I'm saying is you're going out and you're doing this job every day where you're sacrificing and you're, putting yourself on the line for complete strangers. And you are doing, in my mind, an admirable, noble profession. And the reaction from the community is not generally one of support. It's one of, we don't like you, we dislike you. And whether or not that's true or not, the fact that the majority of police feel that the community doesn't like them eventually takes its toll. And so when, this is just one of the many things I ask about in the survey, and what kind of effect does this have over time? Well, that's what I hope to identify. I hope to get people treatment. I hope to get prevention and management in place for those that need it. And because it's a thing that one of my friends is a good cop now, and we were talking about traveling, which was very difficult for me while I was on the job, and immediately after I left it, I went into like couldn't relax mode. I was certain I was going to be victimized. I was always on the alert. Vacations were exhausting. And I've made so much progress in that the buddy I travel with, who's a current police officer right now, noticed it, and he's like, I want to do that. So he was like, I'm pushing myself to travel so that I can get to where you're at, because I don't like feeling like this while I travel. So, like if we can make the quality of life for the first responders better, then that's awesome. You know what I mean? So
yeah, and what I try to explain to people, I have a lot of people that ask me, how was it, or why are cops so negative, or just those general questions, people that have never worked in that field ask. And the one thing I tell them is that if you go out to happy hour and you're in a regular job, you're in an office setting, I mean, let's talk Steve Carroll office, selling paper or whatever, when you decide you're going to go to happy hour, your conversations are going to be about life. They're going to be about what's going on, what's happy things that are going on in your life, maybe some stressful situations or something like that. If you have a really good relationship with your coworkers, your and I conversation when we go out for a happy hour after a shift, maybe, God, I can't believe I just saw a dead kid, or I saw this lady beaten within an inch of her life. And, I had to literally stand in the hospital room with her and try to get what information I could so we can make sure that we arrest the correct person, or, those things. And so, and what I try to explain to people is that if those things happen once, you would probably be fine, or you'd be fine. There's going to be some people that are going to be affected differently, but you could be fine. You could get through those things. When you start adding on 5, 10, 15 years of that and seeing that every single day, and that being the only thing you talk about, and that's where you start to become friends with just cops, right? Because nobody else understands what you're going through, or at least in your personality, in your head, you don't think anybody else really understands unless they're working that job. So what that breeds is all of negative. Me and Jim go to beers after our shift. Everything that happened negative in Jim's night is also going to be negative in my night. And then my night is definitely going to be playing on him. So we're going to be going back and forth, and a lot of it's negative banter, and just trying to deal with those things. And sometimes that's just such an unhealthy situation to be in.
Mm-hmm. I think at the heart of law enforcement distress syndrome is that first responders have seen so many activities go badly. So, there's a million people a day that cut their lawn. There's a million people a day that, maybe even more, who knows, you'll get the point of this when I'm through with what I'm saying, is that use a chop saw. But when do we get called to an instance where somebody was mowing the lawn and, when it's covered the ambulance, somebody, ran over their foot or reached up in there and chopped their hand off, or I had the guy using a chop saw and I get a cover of the ambulance call and the piece of wood stuck in his eye. It's a huge 9-inch sliver just jammed in his eyeball, and it's like, so and all I'm doing is covering the ambulance just to make sure they don't have any problems getting the guy in, getting the guy out, that everybody understands that we're looking for foul play, obviously, while you're there, something like that. Was this something somebody threw it, So, but the point is that over time and every day when you're seeing mundane situations and activities turn into something bad, in the head of first responders becomes the likelihood that something bad is going to happen when they're doing a regular activity becomes much greater than it actually is. And that's what starts to, I think, permeate through and produce a lot of these symptoms that reduce quality of life. You know what I mean? And if you're a cop and you're a first responder and this isn't affecting you, great. That's even more power to you. That's great to hear. But if you are doing this job of police officer or first responder and you are, I think the society owes you a debt of gratitude, but I also think we owe it to our first responders to make sure that their mental health and quality of life is up there, because they're doing that job that's so tough to do. And so that's really where I'm at with this. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just trying to make things better.
Yeah, and everything you're talking about, or we're talking about here, that plays into your relationships at home, man. And I don't know where we rank, where law enforcement ranks now, but I know that when we were going through it, we were at least number 2 or 3 in the nation for careers for divorce rates, and there's some other tough, like crab fishing and stuff like that. But, those, for being such a huge profession and having those kind of statistics, I mean, it's not like, a job where there's only 2,000 dudes doing it or something, where 10 will throw off your averages. I mean, we're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of cops, and we still rank in top, of divorce rates and stuff. And I think a lot of that has to do with people not taking the time or putting in the effort to understand it like you're doing with your survey.
So, that's the other thing that's interesting about these results is I was really surprised at a question like, I feel more depressed since I become a police officer, that's over 50% of the people responded have agreed with that statement. So you have here like this work and this experience that is people's vocation that's overall depressing them. Then there was a second question about, do you feel that the job of police officer is depressing? And the majority of people agreed with that also. Cops felt like they've been more anxious since they started the job, which anxiety has certainly been an issue for me. And then I started to ask about like alcohol and drug use, because one of the 8 symptoms is alcohol and drug abuse. And I don't think that gets there for, necessarily until people, I mean, we all know cops and first responders that have had problems with alcohol and drugs. I think it's less of a problem, we're talking about a few of people. But one of the questions that I thought was interesting about the alcohol and drug use was, I asked a question that said, are you worried that alcohol use could be a problem for you? And the majority of people did not say yes. In fact, it was 24.5%. But if you think about, you might think, well, that's not very many people, but 25% of first response, that's actually, even though it's a low number and it's not a majority, I mean, that's a worrisome number. And if I can do something to help the 25% of people feel like, not alcohol is a problem, but that they're worried that it could be, means that it's at least on their radar, and that in some fashion they're using alcohol to cope with the stresses of the job and what they're experiencing. That if we can even get to that 25% and just make sure that their quality of life gets better and they don't have a problem with alcohol or drugs, then that, in my mind, is like a huge success. We've changed the world for the better, and I could sleep great at night. So this isn't even about overhauling law enforcement in general. This is even about getting to, even if it's just a minority of people, and we'll know more once I have more surveys and responses and can do a more in-depth analysis, but to even help, even if it's a minority, 20, 30, 40% of officers that need help, just to even help them is noteworthy, I think. So.
All right. Well, I mean, just to put it in perspective, I mean, I'm not a math guru or anything, but 25% of 10,000 cops, that's a lot of cops.
Yeah.
You don't really have to be a math wizard to do those things. So, I think that's a huge number. And actually, that was going to be my next question. So if you were talking to some people and they, maybe that were on the fence or anything about taking your survey and those kind of things, you touched on a couple results that you've seen so far. Is there something, is there one result that really sticks out to you that maybe just make people conscious about? I know the whole thing is important, but if you could, like we talked about the alcoholism thing, to me that's a lot of people. Is there other things, that you're seeing that, people should just at least be aware of outside of just, that they're changing or they're having an issue, Yeah.
That? So there is one thing. It doesn't necessarily I guess it could boil down to one question, but there are a series of questions that address this. And one of the things that I've noticed, the general trend in these responses, is that the social world of law enforcement officers shrinks with more time they've been on. So as we were talking about, they feel like the cops are their only friends. Then I ask questions about trust, and there's a vast majority, not vast majority, but a majority of the cops are saying they don't feel like they can trust people, and that they believe people are not telling the truth, and they believe that people are only out for themselves. And they're making, and this happened to me, so my judgment about human behavior and human motivation became skewed and warped, such that my distrust of everybody began to grow. And this is the answer to your question, is that can actually, and did for me, work its way into your intimate circles, such as your intimate relationships and families. And I ask a question on the survey about whether or not, as a police officer, you feel like you could discuss what's going on with your family, and less than half of them say they can. And so to me, that's that marker that this distrust issue and distrust of others is one of the symptoms that I talk about, is permeating its way into the interpersonal lives, not just the job lives of the cops, and making it to where they don't know where they can go. Because I also ask about, have you sought counseling? I mean, counseling was free for us at our department, right? And I did go, and I didn't make any bones about it, but there was a stigma attached to it. I think people always made a joke, well, why don't you go to the psych guy, right? But when I ask about that in the survey, less than half of people have sought counseling. So I'm trying to work with, and just to segue just a minute, Dustin, I reached out to a lieutenant in Oregon who was featured in Men's Health, who does mindfulness meditation. I was approached by the founder of a 501c3 in Kansas City just last week, who has a nonprofit called Code One Wellness, and we're talking about doing something together. So I'm getting networking going. So it might not just be like people that are just vehemently opposed to sitting on a therapist's couch. I mean, maybe there are some other methods like support groups or mindfulness techniques or other things that we could work on that they would be willing to do. So that's interesting, and it'll be fun to see where that goes too.
Yeah, man. So no, I mean, Steve, you're doing great work, and you know, I mean, like we said, a lot of this stuff, it just hasn't been investigated because the people that should be doing the investigating, right, the cop, anybody that was in law enforcement and stuff, you know, that was, you know, for the longest time, it was taboo. You know, don't look at that stuff. You know, we don't talk about it. We shelf it in the back of our mind. That's it. You know, you just deal with it. That's life. That's how it is. When in reality, now that we're out of the profession, we see that that's not life. You know, we are doing fun things. We're doing, you know, we're living lives. I mean, you're traveling a lot. You know, I'm doing the things I want to do, coaching football, doing those things. And, you know, you see really fast that, you know, I don't want to say closed-minded, because it is definitely something that gets worse over time, right? But, you know, when you feel yourself going into those things, I mean, that's going to affect every other thing in your life, right? And so it's your relationships, it's, you know, your health. You know, I don't know, I could probably count on one hand how many times I've actually been sick, knock on wood, but since I left the police department. Right. And now I'm not contacting dirty, gross bums or stuff like that, touching them and doing that kind of thing. But just as a perspective, I'm around 40 kids in a weight room and doing those kind of things. And kids, anybody who knows, is total germ, you know, pads walking around. And so I attribute a lot of that to my health inside, my health in my brain, health in my body, you know, being able to sleep right, being able to do a lot of the things that normal people do. And I'm just happy. And I think that a big part of that is once you start going down that path and you don't catch it, you know, it's just going to continue to get worse. It doesn't just automatically come back by itself. You have to identify it and you have to attack it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, there are lots of people who know they have issues, who you know, have interpersonal things going on, but they're not interested in addressing them and looking at them and fixing them, you know. And if that's the case, then this isn't for you. This is for people that are interested in improving their quality of life, that are, you know, curious about their own nature and what they're doing, and the things that they are doing, they don't like what they're seeing, so they want to make some changes. And you know, maybe we're getting to a point with the younger generation, because I don't think this is something my dad would have been too curious about, you know, it's like, you know, this is more stuff. But it's cool because a lot of the people that answered the survey, like over half of them now, have said that, like, they don't think having depression issues is a sign of weakness. So maybe we're coming to a time where talking about this won't have the stigma that you were talking about with it, you know what I mean? And that's really exciting to think that, because we got to be able to talk about this, because none of our wellness classes at the academy did anybody say, hey, this is law enforcement distress syndrome and this could happen to you. And this is different from PTSD, by the way. I mean, PTSD is one traumatic event that has similar symptoms, but there's a little bit of crossover, but there's actually a lot of differentiation between the two, and I make that. And I've had the mental health professional experts that I brought the law enforcement distress syndrome to that also agreed that this was significantly different from PTSD. Now, you can have first responders suffering from both, PTSD from a critical incident, but mine is more based on like long-term exposure. And so it'd be nice in law enforcement settings and in recurrent training, or even in an academy, to say, be on the lookout for this and let's talk about this, you know what I mean? And so if you see this start to happen, here's what you can do and here's where you can talk to, because it might not set in right away. Some people not have problems with it, but that's my ultimate goal, because I think the people out there doing that job deserve deserve it. So.
Well, and I'll kind of start wrapping it up with this too. I mean, since nobody's done this kind of research before, there's a large divide right now, if you want to call it that, in the nation, right? I mean, with wherever everybody stands on it, the NFL stuff, and there's some other things going on and protests and everything. And I think that had somebody taken the time to do the work that you're doing now, I'm happy you're the one doing it, obviously, but you'll see where I'm going with this is, if that data was out and the other side, either side, right, they could see the results and why cops tick that way or whatever you want to call it, if there was a little more understanding and that data was out there, it's at least an educated decision or stance, right? And I think that a lot of it right now is, this side doesn't understand this side and this side doesn't understand this side and what they're really trying to say to each other, but nobody's willing to do the middle thing and look into these results and see what's going on to say, you know what, maybe they're not doing this because of, they're not intending to do this. This is just the area they work, or, this is, what they're going through, and, or, whatever you can draw conclusions from in what you're, the findings that you're getting. I just think that I wish somebody would have done it a little bit sooner and we could have avoided this whole divide that's in the country right now, because I think that a lot of it is that we just don't understand and we don't take the time to understand what the other side is going through.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So I told you, I promised you. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, let me just say that if you're interested in taking the survey or reading about law enforcement distress syndrome, it's at stevewarneke.com, WARNEKE. And there's articles, podcasts, the survey, the law enforcement distress syndrome publication that I put out is there also. Way to contact me. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all that also. But my website's really the central hub for everything. So if anybody's interested in learning more, contributing, head to the website. I'd greatly appreciate it. And I also want to say before we left you that I'm so proud of your coaching job this last year, man. And we talked about me the whole time, but I wanted to say congratulations on the coaching job. I can't looking forward to next season for you, dude. That was amazing.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Yeah. So, and I was going to try to lead into that a little bit. And if you don't feel comfortable, guys, if you're a cop out there and you're a new guy and, you're worried that, your information is going to get out there or anything like that, I don't really care. You can email me what you want and I'll go take the test for you. And so that way Steve can get accurate results, because the biggest thing is to be able to educate other people on what you guys are going through.
Well, I'd rather have nobody take the survey than have you take it for somebody. But if people don't feel comfortable taking the survey, anybody can get an anonymous email account. I've asked also several times in my podcast for people to send me, they can just openly write to me. And lots of people have done that. There's a guy, and several of them will allow me to share it. I always ask if I can. I don't associate a name with it if I share stories. But, there's like one guy that is having so much trouble sleeping at home because he's so convinced that something bad's going to happen that he's up all night, clearing the house with his gun, checking that his kids are still breathing multiple times a night because he's convinced that the worst is going to happen. And there are people out there that are, as far as the law enforcement distress syndrome scope of things go, that have progressed, to a substantial amount of quality of life reduction, that I want to get help for these people first. So if you don't feel like you could take the survey, even if they want to contact you, Dustin, and you can forward it to me, but I want, if they can't take the survey themselves, then that's okay. Then just don't do it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I just wanted to try to, I just wanted people to, if they feel like maybe they want their input on that, right, but they're still kind of have that, I don't know if I want to put my information out there. Just, doing the email thing would be, beneficial for sure.
Yeah. If they send it to you, you can send it to me. That'll work too. Yeah. So.
Okay. And this is my one last thing, guys. Steve, he was a cop for 15, 16, how many years? Yeah. So, guys, he was a cop through and through. He wanted to be a cop since he was a little kid. He's not in this. He is literally in this to help other police officers, other first responders, even. These stats, firemen and ambulance personnel, paramedics, they see so many bad things that maybe they can draw some conclusions off of this too for their own fields. And if they want to do their own studies into those things, then maybe they can do that as well. But I really think that this would just be beneficial for everybody to just have this knowledge. So I just want to thank you, Steve, for, spearheading this thing and really, pushing to help the law enforcement and first responder communities.
Well, thank you, Dustin. You've always been a great friend. You've always been so supportive, and you'd always, it's always good looking out between you and me. So I appreciate all your support, man. It means a lot.
Always. And yeah, we'll definitely, for everybody, if you found this interesting, and you want to drop a comment, or, if we'll try to put the link to the website and everything down here in the notes, when we get this posted and everything. So, we'll definitely have links on there for that. But, if you just have a general question, maybe about what Steve's finding or anything like that, he'll be tagged on the Facebook post, and I'll make sure that his email address is up there as well. If you want to reach out to him directly and ask him, maybe a question about this, or if somebody out in the media world wants to pick up on this at some point, you can definitely contact him directly, man. He's a stand-up guy. So
yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, anybody wants to talk to me, more than welcome. So.
Right on, brother. Well, I won't keep you. I know you got 15 irons in the fire, brother, but I appreciate you coming on, man, and let me know if there's anything we can do to help you out.
Pleasure's all mine, Dustin. Thanks again.
All right, buddy. Take care.